this is a community conversation. This is like my fourth one, I think. And it's really the purpose of just like building the capacity for dialogue. So it's kind of like, one, maybe some of us like didn't get to chat as much in the past like 18 months, but also like I think humans are just usually pretty bad at like, dialoguing about things, in a constructive kind of way. And I love the idea of like, for me, like learning how to facilitate better, but also just like exploring ideas from people that I don't know. So I'm glad that, and I know you all at different levels. We have done some that are more tied to the themes of Venture Cafe, like sustainable growth goals and, things like that tie specific to the theme. And I'll be very honest, FinTech, I was like, I don't know what to talk about. I have no idea. So Ansel was like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, well, I think it'd be interesting to talk about like time. And I know that can get very like sticky and weird, and we could just be like, what is it? But I wanted to kind of just explore some ideas a little bit as a group. Yeah, that's my thought. I don't know, since we have a small group, does anybody else want to introduce themselves or do any kind of intros? New to Venture Cafe? Anybody first time?
I can introduce myself. Here, let me see if I can do this for 1 second.
So you don't need to unmute there because it'll just go through the star phone.
No, but I think I have the video.
Oh yeah, there's Bruce. He's here too, in person and virtual. See, that's a weird thing. See how fast he got 2 places at once?
I tried this, so look, there's me. Okay, so I'm Bruce Milner behind the mask here, and so I am a nanotechnology engineer, scientist. I do a lot of things in biosensors and nanomaterials and electronics and optics. I'm currently exploring new startup ideas while I'm also doing consulting, technical consulting. Anyone ever wants any consulting around nanotechnology or semiconductors or optics and things like that for products, I'm happy to do that. But my special interest for being here is diving into a new startup idea and see where it leads.
Cool.
Yeah, my name is Anthony Cafagna. I think my 5th time being here.
That appears so.
So I consult in the med tech startup space, so like remote patient monitoring. My whole background's in just like med tech, med device. So like I said, just here to meet individuals and hear new ideas.
Yeah, great. Come on in.
I'm just okay.
Oh yeah.
Step out and I'll be back. I'll come back later.
So
maybe early next week.
yeah. So I wanted to start with this. So this idea that like we have sort of like we use timepieces all around us. We have our phones, we have watches, we have like alarm clocks, we have all kinds of these ways in which like we have these external things that keep time for us. But that we actually are like walking timepieces from a molecular level, right? Our cells they have their own sort of ways of keeping time. We have circadian rhythms and things like that, and thinking about how time is actually, we use so many of our senses, like if you've ever, has anybody been to Australia? Right? You've been on a plane, and you are on a plane forever, and then you wake up in a new time zone, and you, like, your body adjusts pretty quickly, right? Like, based on really just light and also society, right? Like forcing you to be like, it's time to eat breakfast, everyone's eating breakfast right now. And so I think I wanted to spend a little bit of time today just like kind of getting into like perceptions of time, and also have a little bit of time to talk about pandemic time. Pandemic time, and then also just kind of like ideas of what are other sort of like forms of how we can think about timekeeping and things like that. So I wanted to start with this 1-minute estimation exercise, and actually I need to see that slide. So for those who are virtual, this is just about like getting in a space of thinking about like how our bodies are perceiving time specifically, to then kind of share more about like what things affect how we perceive our own time. And time being like with groups, individually, in different experiences. So the activity goes like this, really simple. It's a 1-minute time estimation, so your goal is to estimate a minute. For those of us who are in person, I would like you to stand up and close your eyes. I'm going to start a timer, and then I just want you to sit down when you think a minute is up. Low stakes here. No, there's no prize or anything. If you're virtual, I would like you to raise your hand when you think 1 minute is up, okay?
No cheating.
No cheating, yeah, you can't, I mean, you can do whatever you need to do. Kristen, just so you know, we are doing a quick 1 minute, estimation exercise where, since you're virtual, I'm gonna start a timer, and when you think 1 minute is up, just raise your hand, okay? All right, now I need to get my timer. See, look at this. I can't do it on my own. Hold on. Okay.
All right.
Starting. Ready?
You close your eyes.
You can close your eyes. I think would be helpful. I need to watch you so I can note. Starting now. And if you're still standing up, have a seat. All right, so just so you know, our last person sat down at 1 minute 23, and actually,
She fell asleep.
the skill set in of itself, right? So I don't know if everyone can see my little like chart back here, but so you guys did, so this is actually nobody, because I just needed to, it was actually, nobody sat down until it was at least halfway into a minute, 30 seconds or more. But most of you, right, like, did it feel, what was going on for you, Angela? Were you like,
Are you okay?
I'm sensing that everybody is
I was
sitting down.
counting, but I guess I don't know what 1 second is.
Did anybody else count? Yeah, okay, you were.
Oh my God, I thought we weren't supposed to count.
I'm curious how that would work if everyone did this and weren't counting because they're distracted, saying, conversing or something like that, whether or not how well we would work.
Well, we can try it one more time with distraction and see, and try to not count and quick see, and then we can move into the discussion. Okay, so let's do the same thing real quick, and starting, so you guys can actually just, if you wanna just stay seated, you can just raise your hand. I realize I'm like, let's not overcomplicate this. Probably would say. Well, at the end, we're like, how long are you gonna stand for?
I was about to sit down like right when she said.
Yeah, so, what's that?
I'm curious, like, can we know, like, what's that?
Yeah, so, Anthony and Emily were the first people to sit down at 30 to 45 seconds. And then, I think it was Rajiv was the next to sit down right almost at a minute. And then everybody else was over 60 seconds who sat down. And I think Kristen also was over 60 seconds, which is, there's a lot of really fascinating studies around this idea that like if you're really young, a minute, like at 30 seconds, you're like, definitely been a minute. And as you sort of age, it gets like 2 minutes feels like a minute. Which is like, to me, the interesting part of this introduction of this concept, because it's like, it's 1 minute. We have so many minutes in our days that are structured, yet still there's so much variability for us and how we like relate to that time. So for anybody new who's joining us, O'Neill, we're gonna do a quick exercise, that we just did, but with, distraction this time. So your only goal is to, when I say go, you're gonna raise your hand when you think 1 minute has passed, all right? Try it last time. This is it. We're not doing this one. All right. Ready? Hold on, I need to start. There we go. Go.
Now we need a distraction, which we talked about. Background noise.
happen is like, we kind of had this idea that like, if you do this quietly, how does it shift when you do it like where there's a distraction, right? Something like the sounds of Venture Cafe at its height, right? Things like that. And so, does anybody want a quick dialogue about what happened? Like, are you surprised that, like, Anthony, for you, like, it was before you were like halftime, so
Yeah.
how did the experience with sound, like, affect your estimation of a minute?
I mean, I think it was a couple of things. One, like I wasn't standing up, so it was like a just additional step.
Yeah.
That, you know, might just allow you to sort of stand more, just like sit a little bit longer. But I don't know, like I really had no real tactics since I wasn't counting. I just tried to listen in on situation, put myself in the actual, just like background as if you're out, and then just try to estimate, but
Yeah.
no real scientific way of doing anything.
Any differences?
I feel like the physicality of standing definitely, because like I think about like when you do a plank, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna do a plank for a minute, but you're just like, all right, it's gotta be time now because I'm like doing something. But if you're just like sitting there, I feel like it's easier to, you know, to sit there for longer, yeah.
I
If you're
felt
not.
the opposite. I felt rushed by the noise.
Yeah, you did. You were like, when it was quiet, you were like, I'll do this forever.
I don't get a lot of quiet time in my life.
Yeah. Does anybody virtually want to share kind of their, I mean, almost everybody was right on 60 minutes or more for that one, and the distribution wasn't that true with silence. Does anybody else want to share what happened to them? All right, you can jump in whenever. Yeah, so I think it's interesting to think about the factors that affect our perception of time. The one of the biggest ones being the pandemic, right? And like isolation or like the social effects. And I'm just curious, like for the people in this call right now, even like how did you feel like what was 18 months like in terms of like time, and what are the factors that actually changed how your behavior shifted in connection with pandemic time, we can say, I guess. Any thoughts? Super fast, super slow. We
For
start
me,
with
it
that.
varied wildly. I mean, at the beginning, I think it was super slow. And then, it switched to be time to start to fly by. Part of that was probably a lot of it was managing kids at home, which was, a lot more distraction and a lot more, I don't know, difficult when they were at home getting other things done.
Yeah.
But, so it's, I don't know, it's very wildly for me. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow.
I feel like for me, a big factor was, sleep, because at the beginning, I was just like not sleeping at all, and so I think, you know, typically you think about the energy you exert in a work day, where you're working like 9 to 5, and you have like the breakfast time, dinner time, and it's very structured, but once you have your day of like 6 a.m. to like 3 a.m., it's like everything is one long day, and like you don't get that, you know, disruption of like, this is work time, and now it's sleep time, and now it's, you know, it was just,
You know, I think this, with the pandemic, like one of the things I didn't like was like, even now, like I used to go to the gym a lot, like 3 times a week, and then I got scared, and I was at Lifetime in King of Prussia, and I used to go to Lifetime almost every day. And then when the pandemic hit, they closed the gym, and then Lifetime was my social activity. I would take my laptop, and then I would do work in the coffee shop, and then do yoga and all this stuff. And like I would, you know, they have I would go there and do work on my computer, and then I think the pandemic, I mean, I'm not talking about the work aspect of it. I think in the beginning, like CNN and the media put fear in everybody, like when the virus was spreading everywhere, and there was no vaccines. It was like so that
Yeah.
so that was a lot of like fear, stress. You know, I went out, and then but then I don't know. I think it's a constant fear that they're putting in us. You know, with
So
the,
that
you know,
fear affected your like experience of
I
time
think
in the
I think before I got vaccinated, I think I had a more fear. You know, I think a lot of people have some fear, right? I don't know. And then, I don't know. For me, yeah, I know like my brother's a doctor, and then he was telling me he doesn't say much, but he said that you know, like that he was seeing patients that had COVID, and I don't know. And then I think and I think yeah, I think money is also a factor too. You know, like income levels,
Yeah, I
businesses,
mean, how,
cash. Yeah, cash.
yeah, thinking about how money affects your experience of time in the sense of like, I mean, does anybody have any other thoughts on that? Like how sort of finances affect the actual like physical experience of time passing? Like, speaking of fintech, no.
I think,
Yeah.
like, I think the whole, like, again, you know, this might be controversial, but the whole gym shut down. Like, I go to the gym every single day, my brain does not function the same way if I don't. And the number one factor that had the outcomes of COVID are how much you exercise. I think it was interesting that the gyms were shut down, yet, you know, like, people are being incentivized to get vaccinated through Krispy Kreme, through other things that are directly related to not so great outcome. And, like, my days when things were shut down were very choppy. Like, I got nothing done. I felt like I got nothing done. And like, just like before I know it was 4:30, 5 o'clock. Whereas now, like, I'm waking up about the same time. I'm getting much more done. I'm feeling much better because of the fact you're able to move around a little bit
So
more.
you think it's like for you, like the action and the physicality, like allows your time to just feel productive or feel more, like fulfilled?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, not even a question.
That's really, anybody have any thoughts on that?
I definitely second that, and I feel like, because I remember when I was talking to my friends about, because I wasn't able to sleep, and my friends were saying, like, think about how much energy you exert throughout the day. When you're driving into the office, you're walking around, you're talking, it's like your brain is moving more and you're physically moving more. And just think about if you're doing all that from the couch, like, there's so much energy you're not exerting.
Yeah.
That just time, you know, goes on and on because you're not, and I feel like a lot of it is also the rhythm of it, like you have like this like choppiness, and I feel like in life, there's like just like a rhythm, whatever your rhythm is, like if people exist in that, in their own time.
In that sense, I wonder if like, for Anthony, if you took away the clock altogether, if like, just the fact of like, that, like exercise being in your routine makes you feel more like fulfilled and productive is a fascinating word also, like productive with work, productive with like your like sort of mental space. I mean, for me, I loved the beginning of the pandemic because for me, time was the slowest it has ever been. My dad told me, once you start feeling time, it just gets faster and faster and faster. And I was like, that sounds terrible, oh no. But the first time ever in my life, it was May last year, right? And I was like, this is great. I feel the most creative and like, I just feel like I never feel rushed, you know? And I think about what that was, and it was like, I think it was expectation of, like, there was no expectation to do anything. I didn't have to do anything, so I felt like I had, like, gained ownership over my time again, in a way that I guess I didn't feel like I had before, which is why I put, like, freedom on this. I think freedom is a word that's very, like, it has many, many interpretations. But for me, freedom was like this idea that time became expansive for me. I remember the point when it stopped, too. Like, I remember the feeling of being like, oh, speeding up again, you know? But I wonder if anybody had that experience, sort of like the opposite, where you felt like you could do more.
I felt like with that, like, I think, like, that built more stress onto me, because I remember, like, I agree with, I think Bruce, he was saying, like, it felt really slow in the beginning. Like, I remember April being the longest month, because, as a student, like, I had to move home, and then like, go virtual for school, and, like, I've never done that before. And so, just, like, that first month of, like, transitioning felt like eternity. I was like, how long is this month going to be? And then, I think after that, like, with classes, and then with being virtual, I felt like I could add more into my day. And so I felt actually the opposite of freedom, more stress, and like, like bogged down to like a computer.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, like I should go on a walk, but then like, oh, I have to take a call while I'm walking or something. So, I don't know, I just feel like the opposite, which is interesting.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
I mean, I imagine that go ahead.
I was gonna say, just like the aspect of self-reflection, like I know, like, I was starting like a somewhat new job at that point, and like, it became very clear, like, throughout the pandemic, like, I do not wanna do that.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So like the self-reflection thing, I think, like, I didn't work out as much as I used to prior, and like, that's like now at the forefront of, what like, I think people got a lot worse and a lot better over the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, a number of different
Yeah.
aspects, and it was sort of like just a turning point to either have you go in the right direction or have you go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think that like with this slide, kind of like, there's this experience of like the freedom, the money that people had that they didn't have in some respects, that allowed people to stop and be like, why would I go back to that job?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, things like that, which is the pause. So like, that was a pause almost like in space and time that allowed some people to feel like more empowered. Then you have this whole other side, which is like grief and stress, right? Which is the other side of like, how am I going to survive? I'm losing like and even just like the sort of processing of like loneliness and isolation, right? There's all these things that I think made 18 months or however long we're saying it is, that actually physically altered it. One thing I want to share that I learned in like reading about time, which is such a weird thing to start like looking up, like perceptions of time and what alters that, is that I learned, I was like, when did conventional time start, right? Does anybody know this, or have an idea of like when we started like being like, I'll see you at 10?
I'm gonna guess.
Yeah, guess, go, yeah.
Cause like I know like in ancient times they had like sundials and things, but I feel like it wouldn't really come into play until you have like the Industrial Revolution, where you have like the factory times and like the whistles blowing, cause before that, we were so agrarian that I would imagine it's like, I wake up with the sun.
Yeah.
And, and that is my guess.
Yeah. Anybody else guess?
Kristen said 19th century.
Yeah, so when I listened to an interview with this guy who wrote this whole book on time. He was like the son of clockmakers, which I'm like, that's legit. But he was like saying that, the common assumption is that it started with the railroad, because if you had to catch a train, it became impossible because time was different in different regions, and that's kind of the standard idea of like with the train, right? So with the railroad came into standard time and Greenwich time, right? All this like sort of centralized time, but that actually the sort of untold story is that the Victorian moralists wanted to figure out a way to like curb drinking alcohol. So they just like, I don't know all the details of this, but picked a time, which was like 11 p.m. So people needed to know what time it was, because if you were drinking after 11 p.m., it was like, you were whatever. It was like going to hell, it was like sinful, any of these things. So what's fascinating to me about that is that you have this arbitrary time that was set that is controlling and driving behavior of people. When you stop, you're like just like how now we're like, do we have to start working at 9? What if we started at 6 and ended at 2? You know, like things, which is like, the questioning of it has been going back, I think, a long time, because somebody just decides, right, that this is like the proper, and this is what progress or productivity is 9 to 5, 40 hours, things like that. And it got me really thinking about what are other, like, how else do we think about standardizing time in ways that would be healthier? You know, like, what did people develop in terms of routines and things like that that were more helpful for them in how they related to the world around them, that was not sort of, I mean, we're doing it now. We're unraveling some of these standard ways, I think. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on some of those things.
That's so interesting how time drives behavior. I never, like, that concept has never, like, crossed my mind before, but I remember there being debates about, like, when, like, school times should start, or, like, class times, and, like, I guess even, like, picking out a schedule for everything, like, that really does dictate how you schedule out your day and what activities you do. And I guess, like, when the pandemic hit, and sometimes people lose sense of time, it's interesting, like, I guess that's kind of, like, a lot of, like, surrounded conversation of like, what do people do during that time, so that just blew my mind when you said that.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you were saying, where I think that I felt more creative in this very brief part of the larger time, and I think it was because it was like, I don't know why it happened actually, but we think about when we have the autonomy to develop our own routine. Obviously, we're gonna thrive more. It's just that it might not fit, right, with like something conventional. What are you gonna say?
Yeah, and then like, I mean, you can look at it from, you know, like just a different perspective to, you know, with like daylight savings time, like there is a higher incidence of people that are either depressed or have just cardiac issues, or whether it's like special needs individuals that you break their cycle, and whether it's an hour earlier or later, like that's a real thing that really disrupts normal life, in
With a
school.
night shift, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I also feel like, because I was thinking about daylight savings time and also thinking about places like Norway, where it's like, oh, we have sunlight for, like, they just have less sunlight, like when you get like farther up north. But I felt like in the pandemic, I was so, this is not like very like hippy-dippy, but like, I was so much more attuned to the sun, and I was so much more thankful of that rhythm giving me a sense of time, because the workday was just kind of blending into everything else, and so I knew when the sun set, that I was like, at least I know it's nighttime. And, you know, I felt much more, aware of that than, because I feel like in normal non-pandemic times, there's a lot more artificial timekeeping, but when I'm like, I was living completely alone, so I was like, I rise with the sun, I guess, like, I don't.
Zoom call.
Right, and then I have a Zoom call forever, and then the sun sets, and I know it's nighttime.
Now I wonder how sense of time and like scenery or just like location they play together, because I feel like time goes so slowly in one space, or it can go really fast. I guess it depends on what your activity you're doing, but I always find like I'm more productive when I like change my location like throughout the day. So that's just interesting.
Yeah, specifically the physical experience totally changes. There's also this physical thing that's interesting, which is that when like Emily used to go to work, she would have this whole like a long like walk, bike, drive, train ride to get to work, and then she would appear at a meeting. Whereas like virtual spaces now, you are instantly, I was reading this article, it's like a wormhole in your pocket. You can be like, she's fun, here, we're all together, right? And like that has to be from agrarian times, right? That has to affect us at some level of just that instantaneous sort of thing that happens. It also made me think, I want to go back to actually this, if we could just spend, this is only 1 minute, so now we're really accustomed to a minute, but just listening to the sound bite that I wanted to play for a second. All right, here we go. Guesses on what was going on there? Anybody? No, did you see the chat?
Yeah, I can read the chat.
Anybody want to guess what that was, where we were? Also, what was that experience like? Did you feel scared, excited, bored? What was it?
It was calming. I'm gonna guess, I don't know, trains?
Ooh, trains. Any other guesses?
I feel like rain hitting a window.
It is natural. It is not rain, though.
Wind?
It's the forest fires burning in California, or Canada, I forget where exactly this one was, but it's just the sound of a forest fire sweeping through like a grassland, and I think I just played it right there because I think there's this idea of natural, like there's also this intensity of a forest fire that is happening, that is happening like, slowly and quickly kind of at the same time, but really like brings you into like a different space, right? Like listening to that and how we think about other frameworks for timekeeping. So like one idea being like natural, thanks. What Emily was saying, it makes me think that there are other ways in which we keep time, which could be like natural cycles, right? This is not new and like, but any other ideas out of just like, what are other ways we could think about like routines or driving like time, how it like can shape our lives in a way that is not whatever, a clock even, like clock is just, it's so boring now. Like, can we think, like, what are other ways that we can even think about like a society being structured that still works? Because I think this whole argument against us is like, Maya, 9 to 5 works, so we figured it out, we have some collective routine here that we do, but the pandemic also showed us that it doesn't work for a lot of people. So how do we even think about the shift? And how we think about like timekeeping, sun, right? So the obvious answer is like, we all get up when the sun goes up. What are other ideas of this? Or like other avenues, kind of? It's a really hard question, so I don't know what comes up for anybody.
Like, the only thing I can think of is like cycles and like sun and everything. It's like, okay, this might be like not the right context, but like a menstrual cycle, like that is the only thing I can
Totally,
think of.
no, that's real.
Like, goes and, yeah, but.
Something that is like connected to your body.
Yeah.
That regulates like your years, aging, all of those
Yeah,
things.
aging,
Yeah. I mean, there's all there's allergies, like there's all kinds of things that are actually connected to your body. I always wondered, I was like, what would it be like if I just told my boss that I was gonna just try a new thing out where I like went to work like when I was well rested and I got up and then I went to work. Like,
Much more efficient.
I would, I'm sure I would, right? But I mean, what a privileged request, one, but then also would it work? Like this idea that if you just have what seems like chaos, if people were able to self-regulate by their own internal regulators to be able to be still productive, and we could spend more time talking about what that productivity, how that's associated with time also.
I mean, you may actually end up working more.
Right. Because you're feeling good.
No, because it's it could happen just one of two things. One, you can either work more, or two, you can have the best creative work you do, but it's with the unlimited PTO, they're finding that people are taking less time when they given a structure. So it could have an inverse. It sounds good in theory,
That's
but
true. Yeah.
just putting stress on your, just as far as the employees, there may be that, oh my God, I'm not doing enough, or I should be working, but I'm not, instead of it's 9 a.m.
That's a really good point. That is the pushing the standard conception of time, the unlimited PTO. Does anybody in this room have unlimited PTO? Or feel free? No way.
What does PTO mean?
Paid time off. So it'd be there are companies now you want to work for the company that is unlimited PTO, which means you can take, if you're I'm gonna go to Peru for a week, or for 3 weeks, that technically you should be allowed to do that based on. Rajiv, are you gonna say something?
What was that?
Oh, I thought you were
I was just gonna say something one of the things I've noticed, I went to Pennsylvania, I went to college at Penn and other places, but I was out of town. I was in Minnesota for a while, and then I came back, and then I came back, and I noticed that the pandemic, a lot of the small businesses, a lot of small businesses got wiped out, and then there's a lot of office space available, right? There's a lot of offices, and I don't know, office space, or I see signs for office space available everywhere. I don't know if you've noticed that. So I'm probably
Yeah.
off topic.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed that. Also, if you want a job and you want a job anywhere, seems like the signs are everywhere too. But that, what does that make you think? It makes you think that people are like, it goes back to the slide that was like, how does money affect your experience of time? I keep bees, and my beekeeping partner was like laid off immediately, and I'm not gonna give her name because this is a very personal thing, but she got like double money from the government. She was like, they don't know, but they accidentally are depositing 2 unemployment checks and then 2 stipends, like the relief stipend. She's like, I've never been this rich. I'm like, oh my God, what do you do? She's like, I might be able to buy a house. And then she was also like, and also, basically I just like go on nature walks and do face masks and think about like writing in my journal. And I was like, she was like glowing. And I was like, man, I wish I was laid off. This is like so, like just her sense of time was like, it was hers, right? Like, and it was the money specifically that for her, she was able to think about what her next move was. She knew that this wasn't gonna last forever, but like, how do I use this very precious time to like design the rest of my life in some respects? Which to me is fascinating that she did that. We didn't all do that, but like, also, she's not like doing anything crazy right now, but like, but to me, like, what a memorable moment in your life to say, to have that, even that feeling, right? Which is like, I'm okay for now, for a little while. What do I want to do? What am I? Like, all of those really reflective things that were because of, like, and then, you know, when it was time for her to like get a job, she was one of the people who was like, I love my life right now. Why would I just jump right back into to working for the library that pays me like $7.50 an hour, you know, like things like that, which I thought was really fascinating because it was like we had this moment where as a society we said, we're going to support you through this like financial relief. And then it was like, and people felt relieved in a way. A lot of people that I know felt relieved. Whatever, there's a whole economic discussion around this that I'm less interested in getting into right now. But yeah, does anybody have any other, I don't want to just talk about, does anybody have any other thoughts about sort of, I don't know, like almost at this point we're at like lessons learned from pandemic time, we can call it, and things that you would like to incorporate either that you did during that time or that you can suggest to the group even about things that were like helpful in that routine. For Anthony, it's like getting back to the gym allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, like, I think it's just being more, you know, just like mindful. Like I read, you know, just a lot, or not really read a lot of books, but just, you know, just as far as like the podcast, there's an interesting guy named Dr. Huberman, Huberman. He's a neuroscientist, and he's just sort of just like dissects things, and he like recommended individuals that had just like a lot of study for sleep, and it's like it's real. And if you take care of yourself, like you are gonna be better, feel better, and like, you know, just going out and not getting sleep and not taking care of yourself, like it will have long-term effects. Like that's for real. So
I feel like for me, something that I really took away was just like the priorities you make with your time, that the issue, because I realized, because the days were feeling so long, I was like, there really is so much time, at least how I was like, there's so much time, you know, and that you can make time. I think for me, it was like the relationships, again, because I was alone for like months. And so when I had the chance to, when I had the chance to go home to New Jersey, like I was making time for everyone, because I was like, there's so much time in this day, like I'm gonna go see everyone I can. So I think, you know, making those priorities clear and then making time for that, because I feel like sometimes you make time for the wrong things, and you don't get that back.
Yeah, that's part of like the expectation thing. I think that I experienced that was very real. Anybody else? Anybody out there on the
I have something to add.
Yeah, go for it.
For me, I think there's like Emily mentioned a couple times, for me, it was just like the length of the individual days is just like out of control, because it's like, I get up, I walk 20 feet into this spare bedroom, and then I sit here all day, and then I get up and I walk 20 feet back, and like and it just is like, I get a Slack message, and then I'm like back in this office just to do something real quick. And it's like really hard to like disassociate that like work from home lifestyle. And so one thing that I I started doing that I try to do at least in the morning is like I put back in like a commute. So it's just like after I get up and eat my breakfast and get ready for the day, I just like go on a quick walk and then come back in and then sit down in this room. And I think, and at the end of the day, it can be different things. Maybe it's a glass of wine, maybe it's a workout, but it's like trying to to end the day and just like really actually end the work day. To like break up that sense of time a little bit.
Which is probably still helpful, like even if you were to go back into an office, if, when, whatever, things like that, having the dividing it up, which is really interesting because I love like that you have, like Emily's, just this idea that you felt like you had infinite time, and then at some point it was overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cause I feel like and I don't know if this is just because I've been thinking about time and stuff, but I've been hearing the time's really flying. We're almost at September. Time's really flying. I'm like, we're back to it. We're back to saying the thing that we always say. You know, like what is that? What is? It's not actually. But like, how do we think about the way in which we experience time? Like what you're saying, like for your walk, it's a moment to just like to experience time in the way you want to experience it, or slow it down. Maybe for you it's slowing it down. For other people they needed to speed it up in some ways. And I think it's really fascinating to think about as we think about like, what is that word for the medicine now? Like where you personalize medicine, right? Oh yeah, things like that, and how we think about almost like health and time in that way. Like maybe it's not even the health practices, but like how do you design a routine that allows you to feel the openness and spaciousness that time and life can feel like, is a fascinating startup. Bruce left, he was open to new startup ideas, but something like that. But yeah. All right, well I think, any other thoughts? I feel like that was a good little adventure into time and the reflections on the pandemic. I did realize that like, I haven't really gotten to talk with a group of people about how they related to their time during that. And as we continue, who knows, as we continue on in it. So,
well, I feel like, and just one other, I was just thinking about this, that how in early pandemic, any activity because time felt so vast, that I was like, I wanted, like, we were making like sourdough bread because it takes 12 hours, and like, I was like, right, doing things that like, I'd be like, oh, I need a 100-piece puzzle because I need something that will take up more time.
Filling the time.
And now that we're kind of, back in it, it's like, okay, well, I don't have time to watch, an hour-long show. I want a 20-minute show because, time has now flip-flopped. And so it's just interesting how, like the consumption of time through activities has really
But the question is like, what actually changed in your life? Because the thing is, you were working through the whole thing. You're still working remotely sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what changed that made time fly by versus needing to get to 1500? That's what I want to know, actually. What's different now? Was it that we didn't know what was going to happen? Was that part of it? O'Neill, you're shaking your head. You think that was it?
I do. I think we honestly, I mean, for me at least, I thought the world as we know it was over. And we had to start thinking of a new way to operate in this society in a lot of different ways. I mean, we saw how our freedoms were taken away very quickly over an invisible threat. And what if the threat is in our face? What happens then? What gets taken away? How do we operate when we can't communicate with each other and share our ideas and meet in person? What happens? Now, I think we're seeing that now. A lot of people are coming out of their silos and not knowing how to interact with other people and thinking your idea is the one, and not having that discourse to remind us that we are coexisting on this planet with other people.
Oh, okay. So, go ahead, keep going.
So that's where I think that's what was the difference was we didn't know what life was going to be like. And I think now we saw that it was just kind of, all right, we had a little bit of boring time. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people lost their businesses, but you're right, it's going right back to normal. And that's just, I think that's it. It took that finality away by us going back
But
to
I
normal.
Yeah, I hear you also saying though that something about whether you were isolated, whether you were with your family, you still probably saw less people, you know, in general. I think it's a safe statement. I also hear you saying that there's something about like interacting with more people regularly that that takes you out of yourself versus like being alone is more expansive. I don't know where I'm going with this. Being alone is a little more expansive in the sense that like you make all the decisions. Nobody's saying that's not a good idea. You know, it's just you. And then when you remember what it's like to be with other humans, particularly building and making things, that it changes. I don't know what it changes, but it changes like your what does it change? It makes you like you have to be accountable to other people. You have to actually input more things into your own mind because somebody's saying like, no, I don't think that's the way you should run your business. You should do it like this. And you're like, it's not, I didn't have that in my head. Now I have to put that in my head, see what I think about it, compare it, either come to it, you know, whereas before you're like, I'm just living my own life, making my own decisions, and I have so much time to do that. That's what I hear also in what you're saying.
I think there's a lot of that too.
Say that again?
Your frame of reference, I think that's
Yeah.
what you're looking for.
Yeah, is like just you versus like the community or other people or just being on, or strangers, right, all of those things. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that was like, that is, and I think part of me is like, this is messed up to say I know some, but I think that like, part of me wants to know like, how do you incorporate the level of uncertainty and unknowing in a positive way? In the way that you like are like, you carve out more time, because part of what I also hear is like having routine is really helpful to our livelihood and health, but it also makes us get kind of numb and bored, and then time flies. But when it's not as boring, that's not a totally true statement, but I'm just trying to bring it all together in my mind.
I mean, like I think the whole question around, like if you were around, say, like 20 or 30 people during the pandemic, I think, and you didn't have to wear masks, and you're in like a, like very controlled, like I think that would have completely flipped how we felt. Like we're very just interactive. I mean, as far as humans are very interactive, and to take that away and be just subjected to Zoom, like that's a part of your behavior that is interrupted, and it's going to change how you feel because you're not getting that stimulus that you used to. Just really getting. So I think that played a role into it. It's just like it's like isolation. I mean, it's very similar to being in prison. I said, I will never go to prison because, like, it's miserable. Like, and that's sort of what it was, like a 1-year sentence, pretty much, what a lot of people went through. So I think that played a role into the, whole aspect of things.
I mean, I think like, I live alone, so like, but I have a big family. And so during that time period, I had to really like reform connections that I didn't have with certain family members in order to like have a bubble, like, you know, like have a bubble, like, okay, like, I'll spend more time with you, I guess. And so like, I think that was what kind of like kept those social needs like in place for me, is like really being with my family. And like, I feel as though that even to a point was a privilege, because a lot, like, people didn't have access to their families, or like their family lived far across the country or something like that. So that was something that I did in order to like combat that isolation feeling.
Just hang out with the family members that you're like usually like,
I like you now though. Don't be any appreciation though. Like, I'll talk to you. Like, I know we don't talk ever except for Thanksgiving, but like, I want to talk to a person. Any person. That weird cousin. You're like, all right.
That weird cousin loves you now. Anyway, we're just wrapping it up. Go ahead.
Also, you know, like, I think that you know, coupled like the pandemic, like I think it also like it's a global thing, you know, reach. So I think it hopefully should unite people more, because sorry, a lot of countries got hit. So I think hopefully the people, hopefully we could be more united and more productive as a as a global community, all countries. I think that
Yeah.
would be something that, and the knowledge sharing and, lessons learned should be, I don't know, should be like shared, those kind of things.
Then, go ahead, Anil, were you gonna say something? Oh, no, okay. The next conversation, not for real, but like if we were gonna follow up, I would want the topic to be leisure time, because I think that's like another fascinating thing where like we come from like such a capitalist lens of work and society that to be like, what does it mean to be leisurely? How do we like add that into our lives in a way that talks about health, talks about mental health, talks about all these different things and like just whatever. That's our next fictitious community conversations on time. I just realized that I should have done this whole time, so I should have like a room full of people that you guys can't see. I want to thank you all for joining. And the next community conversation is in a month. I don't know what it's on or what date it is, but if you have any suggestions, how do they get in touch?
I'll put the email in the chat.
I can put my email too, because I like think about these things for like 3 weeks. And I just talk to people about them, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. So if you have an idea, I would love to, like, if you're just like, I don't have a place to talk about things, but this is a space that you can, send me an email and talk about ideas, because, yeah, I like it, so. But thanks for chatting and meandering around here, this weird time discussion. I appreciate you all, and I hope to see you in a month. Well, some of you will see you sooner, but.
Yeah, all right, thank you so much, Maya.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, bye, guys.